So for our second talk, we're going to welcome Tudor to the stage. And we're going to talk about founding the SaSS in ScSS.
Okay, can you hear me? So, annoying. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Tudor. I also work in Adevinta with Kiko. You can see the sticker on my laptop next to the marijuana leaf, which I would appreciate if you would ignore. And I'm a senior front-end engineer there. And I'm also one of the organizers of BCNJS. And together with Jan and Tiago, we organize this event, and we need speakers. Okay, so please consider to submit a talk. And don't be shy, because you always hear these stories like X went to a meetup and rocked the stage, and no engineer has ever rocked the stage, except if he fell through. So Freddie Mercury rocked the stage, okay? Like, it's normal. We're also people like you, and I'm sure a lot of you guys just have a lot of cool things that you work on. So submit a talk, come here, share it with the community. We have a QR code and a link. You can submit the talk there. And if you're still shy, there's always alcohol. So like around here. Okay, so that being said, please consider supporting us. And I'm going to talk about finding the SaSS in SaSS. And you know, like once upon a time, we had CSS, even before CSS variables, which, by the way, awesome talk, Kiko. And what was the problem with CSS? It was very declarative. So, for example, I have this example here, where I have the same color multiple times. And also, the same typography. These two blocks are repeated. And I write my CSS, I commit it, it goes to production, it's great. Then the designer comes, you know, and decides, no, the colors don't look good. We need to change them. So I go and change the colors one by one. And then, of course, I miss one, which is over there. And it's normal, it's human, we make errors. So I submit that, it passes code review, goes to production, then people are, oh, you broke production, it's just a color, but anyway. It's a problem. And there are a lot of tools out there that handle this. SaSS, which is one of the oldest and most popular. Less, Post CSS, Stylus, CSS Crush, which is something for PHP, and something called Please, which is kind of like when you try to make your code work in Internet Explorer. You go, please, you know. But there are a lot of them, so just choose the one that works for you. I chose SaSS, which stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets. And SaSS has two syntaxes. Originally, when it was launched, it had the syntax like this, which is a bit weird and unfamiliar. SaSS was written in Ruby. It is written in Ruby. It has some of the Ruby features, and people didn't like the syntax. And then they submitted another syntax, which you can find in ScSS files, which stands for Sassy CSS. So this syntax on the left-hand side is called Sassy CSS. And then, if you look in the dictionary what sassy means, it's lively, it's bold, you know, it's something cool. And I was like, really? Is that thing? Because like I'm speaking a bit from ignorance. This is how I would use SaSS. This was my idea of SaSS. I would declare some variables, a mixin for typography, and then just write my code, reference those variables, include the mixin wherever I need it, and that's it. Whenever the designer changes his or her mind, I just change the variable, everything propagates, was great. And it solved a lot of my problems, but this is a glorified string replace. Like, you can do that with sed if you're really, really good at bash. And the SaSS is a 12 years old project. It's like, and I was thinking, like, what do those people like work for 12 years, you know. And but I was happy, like this was a thought always at the back of my head, because was not a current problem for me until the right project came along. So now I work in a project called Delta at my current job, and this is a framework to build design systems. So for example, we need to allow our users to create graphical elements. For example, here you have some buttons. And you have like the primary button, which is like the primary call to action, secondary, and so on. And each of them has different states. You have the normal state or default. You have the hover when you hover the mouse, active, disabled, and so on. And they're different colors. But the difference between the colors is always the same. Like for example, this is the whiter or lighter by the same percentage as this, and so on. So I had a color matrix of colors, where I would have an arbitrary number of colors, and then I had lighter shades, and then I had darker shades. And initially, so this needs to be extensible for an arbitrary number of colors. But initially, we support 11 base colors with 4 shades each, which makes a lot of combinations. So maintaining this by hand, it's a nightmare of its own. Because the designer will come and say, can we change this color? Of course, you change the base color, but then you need to change all the shades. And then it's like, no, it was better before. So you change it before. It's kind of like when you move like a piano around and people say, no, move it to the left, move it to the right, up, you know. So I wanted to have something like this, okay? I wanted to do some SAS, magic, okay? So I would declare here a set of colors, like I would declare primary color, secondary color, layered, and then darker shades, by which percentage to be darker. This means I'm gonna move aside if. And would be darker by 25%, by 50%, and so on. And an array of percentages of lighter shades, like 25% lighter, 50% lighter, and so on. And then some magic, some SAS magic would happen. And I would get like color primary, darker 1, color primary, darker 2, color primary, darker 3, and so on. Which is a cool idea, no? It has one problem. Doesn't work. This is because in SAS, you cannot generate variable names on the fly. Like, for example, in PHP or even in JavaScript, you can generate variable names from strings. In SAS, you cannot. The compiler just doesn't support that. So I looked around, you know, like in the manual, because, of course, I ended up reading the manual, the last thing. Like, I didn't start with the manual. I started with, you know, not the manual. So SAS supports something called SAS maps. And here, I just declare a set of tokens, which is a map. A map is kind of like an object in JavaScript. So you have key value, key value. The only thing is that you can always add and remove keys from the map. So then, I had to do some magic that would create, like I would give it a base set of colors. And then I would receive another map, another SAS map, with the original colors and all the shades. And I managed to do it. Okay? And this is exactly the function, and I'm going to explain it line by line. So first of all, I declare a function. SAS supports functions, which is super cool. I didn't know that. And then I get the tokens, which is like my initial set of colors or my initial values. Then in the tokens, I may have information about colors, but I may also have other information about margins, paddings, and so on. So I don't want to apply the function to all the elements in the SAS map. I just want to specify for which colors I want to generate the shades and for which I don't. And then I would have like color primary, color secondary. This is like a default, this is a function, and this is like the default entry parameter. And then I would also pass it a list of darker shades, which is darker shade 1 is 25% darker, darker shade 2 is 50% darker, darker shade 3 70, and so on and so forth. Same for lighter shades. And then you can iterate over maps. In the same way you can do in JavaScript for each. In SaSS, you can do a each, which is kind of like the each from Lodash. I think it's modeled on the same kind of format. So I would go each. So for each of the colors, then I would go for each of the darker shades and percentage. And I would create a new entry in my map, which would be the color name dash the shade name, and then I would mix it. I would mix black with the color and apply the percentage. And then I would do the same for the lighter colors. And I did this, and this is how you use it basically. I have a palette of colors. I have a primary, secondary, accent, success, alert, whatever. Then I do palette equals delta shades palette, and then whenever I want to get a shade, I would go, for example, let's say I want to get the first darker shade for the primary color. So I would do map get from my SaSS map, and I would be able to use that color. And it worked, which was amazing for me because I honestly did not expect it to work. And I was super happy, So then the question is does it really work? Because it worked on a couple of tests that I did in the browser, but this project is meant to be used by millions of users worldwide. So I need something more robust. I cannot just go to my PO and say oh no, it works, trust me, I'm an engineer. So, well, I can, but what's gonna happen. So I needed something more robust. I needed something that would allow me to deploy to production with confidence. I needed to unit test my SaSS, in a nutshell. And of course, I went to Google, and maybe I'm not the first weirdo that tries to do this. And I actually found a NPM package called SaSS that you can plug into Mocha and run tests on your custom SaSS functions. And how a test looks like? It looks like this. You import the library. First of all, I import true. It's called SaSS true. Then I import the definition for my function. And then if you're familiar with unit testing, Karma, or Mocha, it follows the same. You describe, then you specify the test. And then I just run assertions. And I can assert that something happens the way I expect it to happen. And this is like a SaSS unit test. You can write any type of unit tests for your SaSS functions that you could write in JavaScript. And this was, for me, this was mind-blowing. I actually didn't expect to get that far. And I created a pull request. I submitted to everyone in the company, dude, look at this. This is super cool. Of course, people have their own jobs and stuff. But deep down, I felt really good. So then in my project, we use React, and we use web components. So in React, in order to style React-based components in React, we use regular CSS. In order to style web components, we need to use CSS variables or custom properties. So for example, this on the right-hand side is what I want for the web component, and on the left-hand side is what I want for React. But the definition of the class is the same. And I'm a programmer, which means I cannot do repetitive tasks. I have a very short attention span when it comes to repetitive tasks. Do it once, do it twice, and then I'm going to go for coffee. So then back to SaSS. Can I find a way to solve this problem too. And actually, I can. I wrote a helper. I call it delta var for delta variable. And then it uses like a generic variable, like as a switch. And if delta use CSS vars is set to true, it will output CSS variables. If not, it will output the actual value. And how I use it in practice, I define my tokens, like my values again in the Sass map. Then I define a class using the helper. And then when I export this and I build my Sass, if I build it for a CSS, for a web component environment, I set that variable to true. And the same class will be outputted like that. If I build it for React, I set it to false, or I don't set it at all, and it will output like that. And that's how I managed to have like a single source of truth for both cases. So if I need to change something in the base class, I just change it there, and the change propagates in both cases. And of course, unit test for it. And again, the same library, the same kind of approach. I wrote 2 cases. First, I test that it works as I expected when the flag is set to false. Then I test that it works as I expected when the flag is set to true. And again, it worked. But at this time, I was already doing this. I was an expert in Sass, so I was not that impressed. I was the hacker man of Sass. So learnings and takeaways from this. Sass is actually sassy. I really like it. And the problem is that there aren't that many good resources out there. Like, you don't find good getting started with Sass or advanced Sass resources. But the manual is actually good enough. Like, if you actually start from the manual and not from the other way that I started, you can get really far with it. So thank you. And if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you. Hi, Tudor. Well, we met last week, and interestingly, this particular problem has a huge application for something that we're looking at. I didn't know you had this in sort of your repertoire.
Oh.
And for everyone's benefit, I'm the CEO of Smart Points. We are points that are installed in HP and Samsung, Philips, and all the lobbies of large buildings. And we have these central consoles. And so the question to Tudor is, in these central consoles, we personalize all of the softwares with a different theme according to the logo, right? So a different color logo has a different color theme, so on and so forth. And it's a particular issue right now because we have a person full-time every time we install a new one to change the whole theme, right? Would there be a way to automate this to read the primary color of a logo and then apply this automatically to the theme?
So if the logo is monochrome, you can easily get the dominant color. If you have a logo with multiple colors, it's difficult to guess which one is the dominant color, because if you have several colors on the logo, okay, you can do an algorithm that analyzes the logo and gets which pixel are most a color, and that's the dominant color. But that is very error prone. So, but you can still get a lot of benefits by just doing this one manual step and refactoring your CSS, Sass, whatever architecture to just take one value, and then everything should propagate based on that value. Like, you can use shades, you can use so on, but automatically detecting the color of the logo can be difficult.
Sure. Thank you. That answers it.
Anybody else? Everybody shy? There you go. Another colleague.
Okay, first of all, I didn't see that pull request.
You weren't working for us at the time.
Yeah, sure. No, my question is, do you think, given that you have been investigating a lot, as we can see, do you think there could be a way to plug into that function in SAS, some way to check the color contrast of the shade you are generating against black and white and for accessibility reasons?
So technically you can, but there are tools. You can Google for A11Y, and if you use tools like Storybook and stuff like this for your components, you can already plug it in and it will give you this automatically. Writing your own thing in SAS can be difficult, because while SAS is SASSy, it still has a lot of limitations. It's not meant to do complicated computations. So implementing fancy algorithms to detect that those thresholds can be difficult.
I didn't fully understand doing unit tests on SAS code. What was you outputting? So would you put a color in and just see the different shades being printed out on the web page?
So first of all, I didn't have to see it on the web page, because this will just are you familiar with unit testing?
No, maybe that's why I'm struggling.
Yeah, that's so I have a reporter which is called mocha, which just runs the unit test, and here I have assertion. So I get something from my so for example, let's say I get from the shades that I generated, I get the secondary darker shade for the primary color, and then I expect to be this. And if the expectation is not true, the test will fail. So I don't have to actually have a browser. It's just like a string comparison.
I see. Yeah. And you run that in the SAS code, or when did you actually run it? Oh.
Yes. So when I build my SAS code, this plugs into Mocha, and Mocha plugs into Webpack. So I build with Webpack, and then I use the SAS loader for Webpack.
And then the output would be into a CSS file.
If the test, no, this is just the test. So the output of the test is failed or passed in the console. So if it returns to the environment a failed test, my build stops, and I cannot merge the pull request. So we use Travis. For example, whenever I finish something, I create a pull request that goes to Travis, gets built. If any of the tests fails, the pull request cannot be, Travis blocks me from merging it.
I see. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, so a big round of applause to Tudor.
Yeah.